investment banking.
In 2008, you and Brian Chesky had recently graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design. You were living in San Francisco, trying to figure out a way to make the rent.
And that's when the design conference came to town. The hotels were completely sold out. And we thought, geez, we have all this extra space. And I had an airbed in the closet. And we said, let's blow up the airbed on the living room floor. And then we realized, you know what? We've got room for 2 more airbeds here. So we ran to the store. We got 2 more airbeds. We blew those up. And we said, you know what? Let's make this more of an experience. Let's actually design this.
Yeah.
It's not just a place to sleep. Let's pick up our guests from the airport. Let's offer them breakfast in the morning. So we were actually, from the very beginning, we were designing this as a holistic experience for our guests. It was not just about a place to sleep.
Why? You know, the hotels are sold out. They're going to have to stay there, right? If you can get them. I mean, they're just looking for a place to stay. Why did it become this big thing from the very beginning? Because you started this website. It was called airbedandbreakfast.com. You didn't just post it on Craigslist. You had a grand vision even then.
That's sort of the natural instinct of designers. Right, if you're designing for somebody, it's not just about the airbed or the place to sleep. You think about, well, what happens before that? What happens after that? The best designed sort of approach is to think holistically about the experience of something. It doesn't matter if it's a consumer product, a trip experience, whatever it might be.
The 3 guests who stayed, you can see their photos in Airbnb's office now when you go in.
And that's on purpose. You know, like if you visit Nike's campus up in Portland, you walk on the campus and you see these huge images of LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, that's their athletes. When you walk into our office on our campus, you see these giant pictures of our hosts. They're our celebrities, they're our athletes. Without them, we wouldn't have a service. So for us, it's about celebrating them the same way Nike celebrates their athletes.
In the beginning, when you started out, you had this idea that it was going to be essentially a conference business, that you were going to get overflow from conferences.
You know, for those who are starting something, those starting companies, I think there's sort of this mythology that if you build it, they will come, right? And we built it, and guess what? They didn't come. It actually took a lot longer than I think any of us had thought. So about the first year and a half of the business, nobody even really knew about us. We say we launched 4 times, and you only know the 4th one because the first 3 you just never heard of, because they just flopped. We launched for South by Southwest in 2008, complete failure. We launched again for the Democratic National Convention in 2008, huge hotel shortage in Denver, Colorado for Obama. And we saw this initial spike, and for one weekend, our business was doing phenomenal. And we had, people were calling customer service for the first time, which was actually going to my cell phone. It was like, well, what do we do when someone calls customer service? We don't even know. No one's ever called it before. But of course, there wasn't a political convention every weekend, so as quickly as it went up, it came crashing right back down. And I think we entered the stage that in Silicon Valley, there's a name for it. It's called the Trough of Sorrow. And it's that phase in an idea or a company's history where you go through that kind of, that launch of excitement, and then the wearing off of novelty, and then the trough of sorrow, where you have, picture 2 gears. You've got product and market. And it's like you have these 2 things, and you're so passionate about them, but they're just not touching. The gears aren't connecting between your product and your market. There's a mysterious gap in between that you can't figure out, and that's the trough of sorrow. So
how much money were you making at this point from the site?
We were making upwards of $200 a week. I'll tell you, that does not support 3 guys living in San Francisco. So we went to investors, we tried to raise money, and of the 20 investors that we got intro to, 0 invested in us. And from that, I think there was a really important lesson that we learned, which is rejection is really just a form of invitation to keep going. So we joked, we did raise a round of funding. It was what we called the Visa round. It was not their corporate arm. It was actually just taking out a bunch of credit cards, maxing those out till those ran out. We got out a whole other set of credit cards. I don't totally recommend this, but it's what we had to do to keep going. So at a certain point, we ran out of credit cards. There's this harebrained idea that we had late one night in the kitchen, riffing on ideas, and we come up with this harebrained idea to offer politically themed breakfast cereal during the presidential elections in 2008. So we come up with...
What do you call these cereals?
We came up with Obama O's, the breakfast of change, and Captain McCain's. This made total sense to us, and that tagline was a maverick in every bite. So, one thing led to the other, and we actually ended up making breakfast cereal. We'd literally go to the grocery store and buy cereal off the shelf, pull the bag out of one box and then drop it in our own design box. And then we sold those on the internet for $40 a box. I remember it wasn't until it got featured on CNN, of all places, that we sold out of Obama-Os. It's like we were making trips to the grocery store like every hour, just trying to stock up on cereal. You should have seen the faces of the people at the register when we had 3 shopping carts full of O's. We ended up making $20,000 in breakfast cereal, which was just enough to get us back to zero and pay off our credit card debt. So like, it didn't actually get us anywhere except back to zero.
So I want to know, at this point, was there part of you that's like, okay, I made it out alive. Maybe this Airbnb idea was kind of stupid and I need to stop?
No. I think that this is another lesson for us, which was if we made decisions based on spreadsheets and modeling and graphs and forecasting, all of those things told us to stop. Yeah. So for us, there was a much deeper belief that something existed here, right? That the spreadsheets and analysis couldn't persuade us otherwise.
Using that experience of selling cereal was enough to impress Paul Graham when you applied for Y Combinator. You were lucky enough to get into Y Combinator. And he had some advice for you guys. What was that?
Best advice we ever got. And so it's our first office hours, and so he goes, so where's your market? And we go, well, you know, we don't really have a market. No one's using our service. But New York is showing promise. We have like 30 hosts in New York City. And he goes, so your customers are in New York City, and you're here in Mountain View. And we're kind of like, yeah, we just got here. We're here for your program. And he goes, what are you still doing here? Go to New York City. And the beauty of that is in that moment, I feel like he kind of demystified the mythology of Silicon Valley, which is that something that we had believed, which is you had to solve problems in a scalable way. And so for us, the Trough of Sorrow was us trying to scalably figure out how to get people to use our service. And suddenly Paul comes along and he says, you know what? The best, most important thing you can do right now is to actually get out of here and go meet your people. Go talk to your early adopters. And so we pull up all 30 hosts, we look at their listings, and we recognize something. We see that, you know, their photos of their homes aren't all that great. It didn't look like you really wanted to stay there. And Brian and I kind of look at each other and we're like, you know, we know how to take good photos. What if we just flew to New York and took free photos for hosts? So that weekend we got tickets, we went to New York, rented this really nice camera with a wide-angle lens, and went door to door throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn, meeting our early adopters. We'd take the photos and then we'd show them on the camera, like, what do you think? And people would be like, oh my God, my apartment looks so great. Do you want to stay for some coffee or tea? And we'd sit down on the couch and pull out our laptops. And then instinctively we went into design research mode, which was the best type of research you can ever do is to observe your customers in their natural environment, right? They call it ethnographic research. You go into the environment where people are using your product or your service to understand and see how they're actually using it. So just outside the comforts of your own office, but in the reality of their own home in this case. So here we are. We asked them, oh, show us how you update your calendar. How do you respond to messages? And we saw all sorts of issues with our product. And it was like we started to see that mysterious gap between our product and our market. We came back to San Francisco after that weekend. Nate was coding away back in San Francisco. We said, Nate, look at all these amazing nuggets of gold that we found. And we look at the list, and there's actually things that weren't hard to build. And Nate's like, I can start working on these tonight. And so what happened next was beyond understanding. Our revenue went from $200 that week to the next week, it went to $400. This was magic.
You could tell a journalist that you're growing by 100%.
Right. We were literally going double week over week. So the next weekend we did the same thing. We did this for 5 weeks in a row, and every week revenue doubled.
That's enough to make you addicted to improving your product.
Yes.